Welcome to Tinfoil Hat live from the WiseWolf Gold and Silver Studios. We're back in studios. If you go to samtripoli.gold, use promo code Tinfoil, you too can get in on the Precious Metals game for as little as $50 a month. Good to be back in studio with the boys. A lot of great shit going on. Real quick, I want to tell you my new special, my 30-minute special on Gas Digital drops September 1st, and then September 12th is my Word War Debate. And finally, we'll get into a little later too. I have a crowd special, my 6th one, that's about to drop. That will drop next week. And that one's called Women Can't Peg.
That's great.
Very excited to have. I probably shouldn't have talked about that with our guest on here. He's a professional. He's a professional man with probably one of the best hair I've ever seen in the business. #1 hair guy. If we had a Mount Crushmore hair, this guy would for sure be on it. He's got a new book out called Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, or Tales from Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. Very excited to have him back. It's always a pleasure to talk to one of the OGs. Richard Syrett, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Sam, I thank you. My hair thanks you.
Buddy, how are you, man? What is going on from our friends from the north? It just seems like chaos up there.
Yeah, that pretty well sums it up. Just, you know what, I'm trying to keep my head down or stay above the fray for what it is. You know, all the politics up here. It is, crazy times. I got to be actually thankful for this project because it's distracted me from politics. And if you get mired in that, it can become demoralizing, particularly up here when, I don't know, the conservatives just can't seem to get their crap together, and doesn't matter how miserable the liberals are, they just seem to get reelected time and time and time again. But that's
do you have any faith in that the elections are at all real?
Again, that's one of those rabbit holes that if I start going down that, it would be demoralizing. I think for the most part, I mean, there are shenanigans, and they have some mail-in balloting issues. In Quebec, they had some problems the last federal election where the return address in mainly opposition party ridings where the opposition party was expected to win, they put the wrong return address for Elections Canada on the mail-in ballot. So and then the Liberals ended up winning by like 1 vote.
Oh my God!
But they caught it, and I think I can't remember if the judge ordered a redo or not. But yeah, it happens from time to time. For the most part, that's not the problem here, though. The problem is we've just got information voters, and they just vote liberal, because my grandfather and my great-grandfather voted liberal.
It's very crazy. We just had huge preliminary voting, and Florida is absolutely insanity right now, dude. So they redistrict Florida, and they took away Debbie Wasserman's district. And somehow, if you watch this, it's crazy to see. She won a district that's 100% black, and she beat 5 black candidates. It's impossible. It's impossible. You're either voting for a neocon Zionist or a progressive Bolshevik. That's what they've done in this country. Anyways, Richard, for those who may not be familiar with your last couple of appearances on Tinfoil Hat, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where they can find you, and a little bit about your book, because I know we're going to get into it.
All right. Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone is based on a podcast I produced back in 2018. It was produced in a documentary style. I did about 40 episodes. And from those 40, I selected 16 stories, which ended up as 16 chapters in the book, exploring rock and roll mysteries, legends, curses, unexplained deaths or mysterious deaths. There's an entire section on the Beatles called The Beatles Enigma. Chapter 1 is questions whether the Beatles or Beatlemania and the British invasion was an engineered psyop. I talk about the Paul is Dead legend. There's a whole section, section 3, about the deaths of Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Elvis, and Kurt Cobain. We sort of reopen those cases. Section 4 is after death communications and premonitions. The final chapter is kind of personal. It involves the final phone call I had with my late partner, friend, collaborator, R. Gary Patterson, who passed away just before we were to launch a terrestrial radio program, which later became the podcast, The Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. So I dedicated the book to R. Gary, but it conflicts me to this day. I basically, to cut to the quick, I discovered that the phone call I received from R. Gary Patterson late on the evening of May 16th, 2017, occurred several hours after his death.
What?
Whoa.
Yes. And I can go into more detail there if you'd like. But
yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get into that. Like when you brought up the Beatles, you're in dangerous territory. We have one of the biggest Beatle fans on planet Earth.
Okay.
Johnny. Well, why is that bad?
No, I mean, I love the Beatles. Yeah, you're right. I do, but I'm not. I mean, I'm open-minded.
Well, I mean, I understand it's a sacred cow. I'm a Beatles nut as well. I don't think they were witting participants in this, but the machine got behind them, and
I agree.
They amplified them. They basically used them as a weapon against American youth. They were trying to subvert American youth, and they used the Beatles. Well, I mean, there's another thing we can get into, depending on how deep you want to go.
Let's start with this. I have said, I've been on a bunch of podcasts lately. I've been telling anyone that will listen, I think there's three things that I go, if you ask me what I believe, I go, there's three things I 100% believe in. I'd stake my life on it. And these are the three things. One, that people conspire. Like, that is the most basic of all the conspiracies. Are people conspiring together? That's 100%. People conspire on the smallest level. People conspire on the biggest levels. To control power, money, energy, they conspire. The second one, and this kind of fits into what you're talking about, is that all culture is manufactured. That it's all controlled, it's all presentation. It's a giant magic trick to elicit, again, to control energy and the way you see the world, and at some point to get you, like my whole thing is like our entire reality is a false reality projected on God's reality. That this is my belief, that all your cultural icons, so many of them are controlled. Does that mean every one of them? Probably not. I would tell you the people I know, and I'm going to lose everybody here because they know who I'm talking about. But the people I know on a personal level, I watched them blow up and how they blew up. But I'm open-minded to anything. And then the last one is that the world is ran by sorcerers, that like literal sorcery magicians who are manipulating energy for worshiping a dark entities or entity to basically control us. So I feel like what you're here to talk about today fits into that very well. And it is a plug and play situation. So I would like to start with the Beatles because the Beatles were kind of a phenomenon that hits. They always say they're the most influential band of all time. There's been discussions on whether that's true or not. There's been analysis of whether that's true or not, but we're going to run with that assumption. Where do you want to start with the Beatles? Because I love this topic.
Well, we can start with. You want to go? We can go all the way back to 1781 if you want, and the United States with the Revolutionary War, and Cornwallis, the British General Cornwallis surrenders at bloody Yorktown, and they lose the colony. They lose the American colony, and so if you can look at history from that point on, 1781 to the present, as the British Crown, let's use that short term, and that includes, the elites, MI6, the City of London proper, and the Bank of England, the Tavistock Institute, which came along really after the Second World War. They've been trying to win the hearts and minds of America, influence American culture, for lack of a better term, take the colony back. And so instead of using muskets and redcoats, they discovered that there's even a more powerful weapon, and that's culture. And so they traded muskets for microphones and redcoats for Rickenbacker guitars, and they weaponized the Beatles and probably other bands that were part of this so-called British invasion, which, that's what they called it in '64 when the Stones were performing on the Ed Sullivan Show, and then later came the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and the Zombies and so forth. I contend it wasn't a metaphorical British invasion, it was a literal British invasion. And so if you look at the timing, the Beatles arrive on the Ed Sullivan Theater 2.5 months after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The American youth were absolutely traumatized by that. He was their president. And trauma is an important ingredient in what we now call MKUltra. First, you traumatize the victim. So this was mass trauma, the same way as 9/11 was mass trauma.
And Charlie Kirk assassination.
I would agree with that as well. Yeah, it's fascinating how these things, play out, in public view most of the time, and televised. Although Kennedy, we didn't see the film till years later, but anyone in Dealey Plaza saw it, and so with the Beatles and the timing, I think is crucial. Now we go back to the Second World War and the Tavistock Institute. It was first created actually in the First World War. They were treating shell-shocked soldiers returning from the trenches, trying to heal their fractured psyches. I mean, talk about trauma. But after the Second World War, they kind of shifted their focus, and it became more like Sigmund Freud meets the Ministry of Defense, and they were more concerned with mass psychology, behavioral modification, brainwashing, propaganda, these sorts of things. And they also understood, and we've, let's call them the elites, they've understood this for a very long time, that if you want to influence or subvert or manipulate or infiltrate culture, society, or let's say the youth, you do it through culture. It's far more powerful than politics. If you listen to a 3-hour speech, your eyes are going to glaze over and you're not going to really be impacted. But a 3-minute pop song, which can bypass the analytical mind, goes right into the subconscious, affects your nervous system. It can affect your blood pressure, your heart rate, your emotional state, of course. They understood that certain chords, musical chords, could create different emotions, melancholy, aggression. It can increase one's sexual appetite. In fact, there's a quote. I begin the first chapter in the book by a quote from a Scottish politician philosopher named Andrew Fletcher, and he said, "Let me write the songs of a nation. Let me write the songs of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." So they've understood this. Even in the United States during the Cold War, the U.S. State Department sent musicians like Louis Armstrong and Dizzy Gillespie and others, David Brubeck. They sent them into these foreign countries. They were trying to combat Soviet communism, and they understood that musicians and culture was the more effective way of battling communism. I mean, you can send pamphlets, and people will recognize them immediately as propaganda. But if you get to a culture or to a society through culture, particularly music, you can have far more influence. And so that's what the British were doing with the Beatles. And again, the timing. So you had a youth culture that were absolutely traumatized. And then in comes the Beatles with this incredibly infectious enthusiasm and these catchy riffs. And the repetitiveness of the music is important too. That harkens back to MKUltra, something called psychic driving, where you put a message. It could be a spoken word or a passage from a book or whatever you put on it. And it plays like an endless loop, and you subject that to the person over and over and over again. It's psychological torture. And Dr. Ewan Cameron, up in Montreal, he was a CIA-funded doctor at Allen Memorial Institute and McGill University, and they were taking women who were suffering from postpartum depression, And they didn't realize that they were being taken into the CIA-funded program at the hospital. They were subjected to electroshock therapy and LSD. Their memories were basically wiped clean. And then they were subjected to this psychic driving, this repetitiveness. Now, this is not fantasy or conspiracy theory. This has all been proven in civil court. There were, punitive damages. There were financial settlements and so forth. It's in the court records. This happened in the late 1950s and early 1960s. And the Canadian government was complicit in it as well. So this was the CIA's MKUltra program, or an offshoot of it. And the Tavistock Institute, there is a lot of overlap with some of these people involved in MKUltra and the Tavistock Institute.
That was kind of the genesis of it, right? And then it spread everywhere. And they took what they learned in Tavistock and brought it to the States and Canada.
Yes, and not only they used it in advertising. So I'll give you another example. The Muzak, M-U-Z-A-K. We used to call it elevator music. You don't hear it so much anymore. They don't need it anymore. But during the Second World War, in American factories, they had to increase production, wartime production. And so they introduced this Muzak system because they understood how music can affect production. It can affect, again, your nervous system, your heart rate, your motivation. And they had what were called audio programmers. And the music was designed, they piped it into the factories, and it worked. They got workers to produce more ammunition or tanks or whatever they were building. And then, of course, they learned, hey, we can also use that in grocery stores, in department stores, and influence people's buying and shopping habits, impulse buying, and so forth. So back in the 40s, they understood how music, or Muzak as they called it, could shape behavior. The Tavistock Institute did it as well. Now, I'm not saying in the book that MI6 handed John Lennon a guitar and sent him to America and said, here, take back our colony. But we've understood for a long time that these institutions or intelligence organizations, they get behind a movement. Maybe they don't create it initially. Maybe it does arise organically, but then they infiltrate and they subvert it and they co-opt it. And that's what happened, I believe, with the British invasion. In fact, I believe it was Time magazine, just a few nights after the Beatles' first performance on the Ed Sullivan Theater, 73 million people watching, February 9th, 1964. Damn. That was 1 in 3 Americans. 1 in 3 Americans were watching that broadcast. But Time magazine later came out with a headline. In 1776, the British lost the American colony. Last night on the Ed Sullivan Show, they took it back. Now, they were trying to be, cute and metaphorical, but they were speaking the truth.
I'd love to know who you suspect the agent was. Was it Brian Epstein? Was it George Martin? Who was the
by
person?
Agent, do you mean handler?
Yeah, handler, sure. Yeah, who was the turncoat? So to speak,
well, again, there's no smoking gun document here that says, but could it have been George Martin? Could it have been Brian Epstein? I don't know. People point to a guy by the name of Theodore Adorno. Theodore Adorno was an academic. He was a cultural Marxist. He belonged to the Frankfurt School. Many of them infiltrated the United States and various government agencies. They were the ones that really coined the term critical theory, which evolved into DEI and critical race theory and critical everything theory. Because these cultural Marxists wanted to destroy the family unit. In fact, they thought it was an expression of fascism. Black Lives Matter later adopted that philosophy. It used to be on their website. They saw the nuclear family as their biggest threat. So too did these Marxists. Now, was it Theodore Adorno? He was also a musician. You can find some of his music on YouTube. It's absolutely horrendous. I mean, it's they call it avant-garde, right? It's avant-garde, but it's atonal. It's discordant. And he hated pop music. He hated the repetitiveness. But he also said that pop music was being used to control the masses. So, is it possible that even though, and he didn't like the Beatles publicly, he said he hated the Beatles and he hated, again, popular music. Is it possible, however, that people at the Tavistock or the Crown recognized his understanding of pop music and had him help maybe craft some of the Beatles songs. That may be a bit of a stretch. Again, my main point here is we know for a fact that intelligence organizations and the elites have tried and successfully, I think, subverted and co-opted the culture, as you stated in your opening remarks, Sam. And I think the Beatles, in that regard, were useful fools. They are incredibly talented musicians. But I see also incredibly talented musicians in the subway, busking or on the sidewalk. And I ask myself,
Yes.
why
that's
are
what
they
American
not?
Idol taught us, is that singing and
Have you ever
music is
seen
not-
Ari at home on YouTube? The guy walks around with his full
Yes.
studio
Amazing.
and just a random guy grabs the mic and it's the most amazing thing you've
Yeah.
ever seen. He's tapped into something.
Well, and that shows you what one person with talent can do with, just an array of random strangers. You know what I mean? Like, it only takes one person to.
But you're totally
form a
right
band.
about American Idol. That there's so. I remember when I first moved to LA, they would run an open mic for musicians, followed by an open mic for comedy. So I'd get there early, and I would just hear the most amazing artists.
Yeah.
And you never heard from them.
Nothing.
Yeah, why are they not filling soccer stadiums? Why don't they have a multi-million-dollar recording contract? Because the machine didn't get behind them, and the machine
Yes,
picks
dude.
certain groups and artists, and then they control them. Now the artist may not be aware of this, and they're trying to be authentic and genuine, and that exists certainly.
When do you
But
think they
maybe-
got infiltrated, if you would say?
When maybe someone discovered them playing in Hamburg, in 60, 61. Maybe something very interesting happened at the Litherland Concert Hall in Liverpool in 1960. In fact, if you go there, there's a plaque on the Litherland Concert Hall. It says the birthplace of Beatlemania. Something happened there, December 27th, 1960. Where even though the Beatles had been performing at the Cavern Club endlessly, and I think they were performing 6 nights a week, 6 shows a night in Hamburg, at different places, they didn't connect the way they did on that specific night at the Litherland Concert Hall. And that was indeed the birth of Beatlemania. People were like in a trance, hysterical. That's where it all began. And people were, get this, they were bringing sick friends and relatives, disabled friends and relatives backstage, hoping that one of the Beatles would lay their hands on them.
Wow.
They had this almost like this godlike status. What happened? Now, I mean, to get a little supernatural, and I don't want to get too far off,
We're
what
all
we're talking
about it,
right
dude.
now. But in the whole first section of the book is called The Beatles Enigma. So chapter 1 is about the British psyop to create Beatlemania. Chapter 2 is the whole Paul is dead legend. Chapter 3 is whether or not John Lennon made that Faustian bargain, made a deal with the devil, and he would
Bingo, dude. So
he would yeah.
sorry to cut you off, man.
No.
But when this is a crazy thing. So when I was very young in Hollywood, I went and I had meetings with MTV and it was going really good. And then at one point in the meeting, the guy goes, "You're gay, right?" And I go, "No. But what if I had said yes?" A good friend
What
of
if
mine.
you had been honest?
What if I'd been honest with him? Where I'd be. But
He probably wasn't a cute guy. That's why you're like, no.
it was fun. I mean, like, I'm not going to judge the guy's look. He was obviously gay. But the point is, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Brett Ernst, talks about a time where he was having he had a holding deal, which was big back then. That meant that they were trying to find a project for you. They threw you money. You were with them for this amount of time with the holding deal. And he took meetings, and it really wasn't even about the art. It was about his political views. So, and we always hear these stories about people who are sat down. They're like, "Listen, if you want all the riches, all the fame, do you agree to do what we want you to do? And that's the question. And it usually involves a death of a family member, kind of turning out your child, all that stuff. It's like, these are real questions that get asked. And it's almost something like in Freemasonry, where there's this discussion about how there's this moment with the Bible, and no matter what you say, they tell you that's the correct answer. Like, if you will spit on the Bible and throw it on the ground and stomp on it, versus I won't do that because I love Jesus. And like, your answer determines which way you go in Freemasonry. And if you and you will be told you made the right decision. That's what they were looking for. But you won't know if you really made the right decision, because it will determine what access of stuff you have on later on. So 100% there's these conversations of whether you're a team player or not.
Right. And when I say Faustian bargain, I don't know if John Lennon, signed a contract in his own blood before Satan. And there's a chapter dedicated to Robert Johnson and the Curse of the Crossroads.
Yeah, we'll get
that
to
whole
that.
legend. But I don't know how it happens exactly. I think at a certain level, we all make a Faustian bargain. We're tempted every day. But we do know that John Lennon would tell his friend, musician Tony Sheridan, and they used to be basically his backup band, Tony Sheridan's backup band in Hamburg. That's how they sort of earned their chops. And he would tell Tony Sheridan all the time, I made a deal with the devil. I made a deal with the devil. Was that John Lennon being, tongue in cheek? I don't know. He also told his auntie and his mother before she died, I'm going to be bigger than Elvis, and I don't care what I have to do to get there.
Guys, they're putting us out of existence. Money's worth nothing. That's why you got to put your money in the precious metals. And that's why I want to tell you about our good friends at WiseWolf Gold and Silver. Let me tell you about WiseWolf Gold and Silver. Wolfpack Gold. If you're paying attention, you know that de-dollarization is real. Fiat is fake, and you don't want to be left holding the bag when the dollar collapses. Gold and silver has been money through all of recorded history and are an excellent way to protect yourself from inflation and geopolitical turmoil. That's why I trust my friends at Wise Wolf Gold and Silver for all things precious metal. Veteran-owned and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau. No transaction is too big or too small, and you can even roll over your 401k or IRA into physical gold and silver. And if you think you can't afford precious metals, think again. With the Wolfpack monthly membership program, you can get gold and silver delivered directly to your door for as little as $50 a month. Wise Wolf Gold and Silver also deals in and accepts Bitcoin. So go to samtripoli.gold, promo code tinfoil at checkout to receive free constitutional silver. And remember, in the world of bulls and bears, be the wolf. Hey guys, guess what? The other day I'm walking down the street. Guess what I saw? BlueChew gold wrapper on the street. And guess what? It was a walk of fame. That's right, dude. That's right. BlueChew Gold is better sex in a tablet. They combine 4 ingredients into one powerful solution. 2 ingredients for hard physically and 2 sport arousal and desire in the brain. It works fast and lasts. Guys, have a complete experience in the bedroom with BlueChew Gold. There's a reason why BlueChew Gold is the #1 brand for better sex. Experience for yourself at BlueChewGold.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners right now. When you buy 2 months of BlueChew Gold, you get a 3rd free with the promo code TINFOIL. That's promo code TINFOIL. You also receive an additional 10% off and free shipping on your first order. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring this podcast and the bedroom. I have I'm not going to say the name, but I told Johnny this about a year or 2 ago. There was a comic at the Comedy Store who was a huge name. And he might have been joking, but I literally walked by him. He was having a conversation, and he literally said, I sold my soul. Do you remember when I told you that, Johnny?
I do, yeah.
And
It's gone pretty well.
And it's gone pretty fucking well. And there's another comic that was like just a regular Joe. And then one day he showed up, and he looked totally different. It was all black. He's wearing sunglasses at night. And you're like, how did this fucking happen? And then it turns out his people in his life are very much into voodoo and all this other kind of crazy shit, dude, that you kind of go, dude, what the fuck, man? It's because I've said this before. It's like Johnny and I talk about this all the time about how I call it Elvis energy. Johnny calls it Hitler energy, right? Like
the Hitler factor.
The Hitler factor, right? And how you either have it or you don't have it. And you know who has it. They just connect with crowds. And there's just some people that don't connect with crowds. And you see it. And you're like, that guy's so funny. Why isn't this popping? They don't have the Elvis energy. And you can't get the Elvis energy no matter how much you try unless you do one thing. And that is sell your soul.
If you go on YouTube, you'll find a clip there. Bob Dylan he interviewed on 60 Minutes by the late Ed Bradley. So we're going back probably 20 years, maybe 25 years. And Dylan basically makes that admission.
Yes.
He's asked, can you write those same songs that you did during, Freewheelin' Bob Dylan days, and he said, no, I can't do it anymore. And then he alluded to, the deal. He made a deal.
Yeah.
And he didn't come out and say, with a cloven hoof disciple of Beelzebub or anything like that.
He has a poetic way of saying it. They're like, oh,
yeah.
well, yeah.
It's also about like, why are you still touring or something like that? And it's got to pay the man.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, it goes back to the destiny thing. I made a bargain with it, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my end.
What was your bargain?
To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And this earth, and then in a world we can't see.
Damn, dude. Mm-hmm. That is crazy.
No doubt who he's talking about.
So was that deal struck at the Litherland Concert Hall, Liverpool, December 27th, 1960? Was it a pact made for 20 years? You go ahead 20 years, December 1980, and his assailant sent to collect the bill?
Huh. Well, now, do you think, this has always been my question with those guys, do you think that they, in the late 60s, are they still playing into to that, or have they gone off script at that point? And is that why, for instance, because we know
going off reservation?
Yeah, like John Lennon hangs his guitar above his bed for most of the 70s. And it's just a father, and then when he finally decides to come back right in 1980, when things are about to take off, it seems. He's gone down. And I want to, do you think, are they more off script in the late 60s with what whoever it is that's handling them would have them be doing when they lean into the hippie thing, or is that part of it? I'm really curious what you think, like toward the breakup.
So 1969, John Lennon had a little side project. This happens before they formally broke up, the Beatles, that is. But he and Yoko and some other session players came up to Toronto. It was called the Plastic Ono Band.
That's great.
And they performed, I believe, at the Varsity Stadium attached to the University of Toronto. Now, Canada's great thinker, great communications guru, Marshall McLuhan, was a professor at the University of Toronto. You'll remember McLuhan from The Medium is the Message. And he wrote about, the global village, predicted the internet 50 years before it happened, and all of these things. McLuhan sat down with John Lennon, and he went through all of this stuff, not the satanic, the Faustian bargain, but the whole idea that the Beatles were engineered, they were a creation of the Tavistock, because McLuhan, he believed that the arts were controlled by secret societies. He wrote about this. People don't understand that about Marshall McLuhan. He was a conspiracy guy. He was very connected with intelligence whistleblowers. And he sat Lennon down and he told him all this. And Lennon, according to the legend, I guess, was furious and stormed out of McLuhan's office. And then he went back to the hotel, I guess, and thought about it and came back several hours later, and they talked some more, and he left understanding that everything McLuhan told him was true. Now, did that plant a seed and lead Lennon to decide to quit the Beatles? I don't know. but it did seem to sort of change the trajectory of his artistic output. A few years later, we had an album like, Mind Games, where he's really talking about these sorts of things. And I think it did change Lennon, and he became far more political. And of course, by this time, the Nixon hated Lennon. They were trying to kick him out of the country. He was living in New York at the time. They had a huge file on John Lennon. They were bugging his phones, tapping his phones, wiring his apartment, and so forth. So yeah, definitely. And I think that we see that with certain artists when they understand, they can see the strings. They're the puppet and they see the strings. They were created by the machine. Now they're turning on the machine, or they're telling people, look, I'm a useful fool. That asset is of no longer use.
Yes.
To the elites. They've got to be taken out at that point.
Yes.
And you see these mental breakdowns of people like Britney Spears and Justin Bieber. Is that what happened to them? I'm wondering.
And it's also when you're no longer making money. If you're no longer making money and you're taking in money, but you're not producing money, now you're a problem. And that's a big thing with like P. Diddy, right? Like P. Diddy wasn't creating hits anymore, but all of his old hits were getting played everywhere and he was making royalties on that. So he wasn't getting any money. He wasn't putting any money back into the coffers. He's only pulling it out. And that's when they probably raided him and got rid of him and and I'm sure there's some stuff where they get out of these contracts. And it's like the fact that he's still alive is absolutely insanity. Like, because he was associated with so much death, like so many people around him either were dead or in jail for things that he did. And you're like 100, like we tell the story here all the time. We had a guy from Hatebreed, Jamie Josta, on our show, and he was talking about how he was thinking about putting his concert films on his website and charging for them. And someone in the conversation that he was having with them goes, well, you better pay them because they don't like that when you cut them out. Going back to Louis C.K., a lot of people think because everyone knew those things about him, what he did like to do in front of women. And I knew the girls that he did it to, and they were kind of have moved on. They weren't really the ones who pushed this whole narrative to take him down, but it was right around when Louis C.K. started putting his own sitcoms on his own channel and charging for it. Michael Jackson, the same thing. Prince, the same thing. When you go off, it's funny that, an assassination like Charlie Kirk reverberates so much. When you look in the rapper community, they're getting off left and right.
Yeah.
They get off left and right, and it's always when they start to get political, want to create their own studio, their own label. They start talking about things that piss people off. Same thing with Martin Luther King. Starts talking about how it's a class war, not a race war. And right after that, he's gone. The Martin Luther King family sues the government, saying that they're behind the assassination, and wins. And nobody ever talks about that. We're arguing whether there's dark forces behind the Charlie Kirk thing outside of a transferee. You had Martin Luther King's family suing the government that they were behind the assassination, and they won. So yeah, I think you're totally. It's like you want to make it in show business. There's a lot of people want to make it in show business, and that's great. You get there, but then there's a price to pay for the rest of your life. Like, why is Willie Nelson? And it's funny because we look at country music as like kind of more God-centric, but now we're starting to see weird things popping up in country music. In particular, Dolly Parton right now is like, people are talking about the weird hand signals she's doing in her stuff. And like her health is failing. She's still trying to tour. It's a weird ass thing, dude.
And country has become really dark. I don't know if you've heard it. I was forced to hear it recently in a car dealership, and it's all downbeat and kind of like dark energy. All the popular music, it heavily influenced by that show Yellowstone. I think a lot of because that guy's taste is very like downbeat, sort of dark music. I had a quick question for you. Do you think? What are some of the messages that you think were inserted throughout the '60s into the Beatles' music and their personas? How were they trying to influence youth through those songs?
Well, I don't have a kind of a scientific breakdown of which musical chords, can evoke certain emotions and so forth. But if you look at the evolution, or some might say the devolution of American culture from 1964, just say 1967, 2.5, 3 years. If you look at the youth culture in America, almost in lockstep with the Beatles and some of the other British invasion bands as well. But if you look at the Beatles, their hair, they said they had long hair in 64, but it was just barely below the collar.
Yeah.
But the hair got longer. The clothes got more outlandish. The normalization of drugs in 3 years, it all took place. And the youth culture almost in lockstep with the Beatles. That is the power of culture. And yes, again, the repetitive nature, and not so much the words, but it's the repetitiveness of the words. Again, think of Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message. It's not the content. It's the technology that has the impact. And so that repetitive nature of the music, which was very similar to psychic driving, which I mentioned earlier with Dr. Ewan Cameron at McGill University, and it's psychological torture in those cases. But here the idea was just to bypass the analytical mind and affect emotions and the subconscious mind.
So interesting.
Yeah, I think they did that same thing to the guy who killed him, who killed John Legend. He must be MKUltra, the
John
Catcher, Catcher in the
I
Rye.
wish they get John Legend.
Yeah, there must have been something. There must have been something with that, with some MKUltra.
Oh yeah, I read
thing.
that book. Like the whole story of John Hinckley is crazy, dude. Like he traveled the world. No one knows how he did it. Because he didn't have the
John
money.
Hinckley or Mark David Chapman?
Mark David Chapman.
Yeah.
Mark David Chapman. You're right. So traveled the whole world. No one knows how he did it. He would work through the Y, which we find out is the YMCA, which is a government cutout. They were using those as, fronts for Christianity, but really they were kind of ways of subversion in the countries they were trying to overthrow. They were sending CIA agents through those places as a way to get in. And then he would get weird phone calls all the time, and he would talk about these phone calls he got, and who knows what was said on those phone calls, but maybe the words to enact this subconscious assassin. That's what they were saying with Sirhan, the woman in the pink dress, the polka dot dress, which most people don't know about. She, the famous story about her yelling, "We got him, we got him." Someone's like, "We got who?" They're like, "We killed RFK," and she runs off laughing she was seen with Sirhan right before the assassination. Is she saying the words that trigger him to do the fake assassination where he pulls a gun and everyone says white smoke, almost like confetti comes out? It's super interesting, man.
Well, absolutely. Now, in my book, Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, I don't get into the MKUltra angle with Mark David Chapman, although for the record, I certainly believe it was a political assassination, and I certainly think there's a lot of credence to that argument that Chapman is another in a long line of programmed assassins. In my book, it's more of a supernatural, metaphysical look at Lennon and the question as to whether he made this pact with the devil that lasted 20 years. I mean, if you go back in literature, the idea of this Faustian bargain. Faust was this German alchemist who supposedly made this deal with Mephistopheles, who was this demon, this German demon, and Marlowe, was a contemporary of Shakespeare. He wrote about Faust, and Goethe, the great German writer, wrote about Faust. And in those cases, the pact was for 24 years. So in this case, I guess it was revised. It's 20 years. So I'm questioning whether Mark David Chapman was not the architect of Lennon's murder, but was the vehicle, the instrument by which the debt or Lennon's immortal soul was collected 20 years after the pact was made. But you, Sam, you were mentioning earlier about how, this Masonic ritual where you spit on the Bible. Well, Lennon sort of did that in a number of ways. You may recall an album that came out in 1966. It was called Yesterday and Today, and it had the four Beatles sitting there wearing white smocks, covered in dismembered baby parts, and the album cover was pulled because it was quite obscene. I mean, even by today's standards, if you've got original, you've got probably a very valuable asset or collector's item. But that was just seen as a total abomination. Then, of course, we had John Lennon's infamous remarks. We're more popular than Jesus. So, was that part of the ritual that John Lennon had to denigrate Christianity? Later he wrote songs, imagine there's no heaven, imagine there's no hell. If you've made a pact with the devil, you better be hoping there's no heaven or hell. Right. In other words, there's no judgment. In another song, he wrote, I'm scared. Then he said, or he wrote, there's no bell, book, or candle that's going to get me out of this. Now, in Catholicism, when someone is excommunicated, a bell is rung, the candle is snuffed out, and the Bible is closed. That is sort of the ritual of excommunication. So, was Lennon telegraphing that he knew time was running out and he had made a horrible mistake? Perhaps. There's a lot of interesting foreshadowing in his lyrics. There's also, I just want to leave you with this. There's a photograph, I believe it's on the Magical Mystery Tour album, maybe on it's a gatefold, I think maybe on the inside of the album. From 1967, Lennon is standing on the street in London, and in behind him you can see kind of a billboard or a sandwich board. It appears to be an advertisement for a travel company. Again, this is 1967. It says on the billboard behind John Lennon, the best way to go, as in travel, the best way to go is, and then the initials of the travel company, MDC. Mark David Chapman.
Whoa.
Fascinating.
Whoa. That is crazy. That is crazy. I also want to get into some of because I could talk to you forever.
Should we talk about Paul's dad before we?
Yeah. Okay, John. Yeah, this is.
I love that one.
Yeah, Paul is dead. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, spoiler alert. I don't believe Paul McCartney was killed in a car crash in November 1966 after storming out of Abbey Road Studios and was then replaced by a body double. Because in order to believe that, you'd have to believe that the executives at EMI or the surviving Beatles or George Martin or Brian Epstein found an exact, body double who also was a left-handed bass player who arguably was more talented than the original. And I say that because if you look at McCartney's work up into 66, yes, he wrote Yesterday, probably the most covered song in pop music history. But post-66, look at the outpouring of masterpieces by Paul McCartney. Let It Be, Hey Jude, The Long and Winding Road, all his work with Wings, his solo music, and so forth. However, having said that, even though I don't believe it, the clues that were left, the breadcrumbs that were left, whether we're talking about the album cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and I thought I saw that in the on your set there in the back.
Yep.
There it is. Yeah. It's a funereal scene. There's so many clues on that album cover. In fact, if you take a straight edge of a mirror and you place it basically cut in half the bass drum. There's a bass drum on the album, and it says, the name of the album. But if you place the straight edge mirror there, you'll get the reflection back. It'll give you the date of McCartney's supposed death, which was in Roman numerals, which is the 9th of November. And then it says he died. So the clues are there. There's also someone placing a hand over McCartney's head, which is sort of Eastern mysticism for, this person is dead. There's a bloody, there's a doll on someone's lap, and the person is wearing a glove, a racing glove on the left hand. McCartney was left-handed, and it's covered in blood. The whole scene of Sgt. Pepper's is a funereal scene. On Abbey Road, you've got the four Beatles crossing the street. McCartney is out of step with the others. He's barefoot. Why? Well, when you put someone in a coffin, you're not buried with your shoes. You're barefoot. He's smoking a cigarette with his right hand, even though he was left-handed. There's a Volkswagen on the side of the road with a license plate that says 28IF. 28 if. McCartney would have been 28 had he lived. So there, and then there's the backmasking in the song, Sgt. Pepper. You know, if you play it backwards, I Buried Paul, Revolution Number 9, Turn Me On, Dead Man, Turn Me On. All these clues. How did they get there? Was it just clever marketing? Perhaps. But there's also an argument to be made that it was a very clever psyop. Imagine how useful this would be for intelligence organizations to be able to sit back and watch perhaps tens of millions of teenagers around the world so incredibly distracted and focused on finding these clues. You know, playing in dormitories all across America, playing the records backwards, taking a magnifying glass, looking at the cover of Sgt. Pepper. Oh, I found another clue. I found another clue. What's going on in 1969 when this legend took off? And it spread initially just by word of mouth, and it still lives with us today, 60 years later. But if you can get students doing that, you distract them from the war in Vietnam in 69. There was the race riots going on. There was so much turmoil in America. And yet you had all of these college students focused on the Paul is Dead legend. And it really began with a call to a Detroit radio station. A DJ named Russ Gibb took a call from a student in Iowa. I believe it was Davenport University. And he told Russ Gibb about all these clues. Russ Gibb had never heard of it before. All of a sudden, the phone lines are flooded with calls. They're talking about the clues. A couple weeks later, the same thing happens at WABC in New York with Roby Young, the great DJ. WABC was a 50,000-watt station. It reached 40 states. Roby Young gets fired on the air by his program manager, because he broke format. Instead of playing records, he was taking calls about the Paul is Dead legend. And here we are, and this all happened decades before social media and the internet.
That is interesting,
it's remarkable,
dude. That is almost what they're saying with Q. Like the question is, can they capture our minds?
Your energy.
Can they capture our energy? Can they get us to buy into something and run with it? And then it becomes a life of its own. And they feed little breadcrumbs here and there. And it's a giant marketing ploy. It's a great way to get, now you're running to buy the record to look at all the little symbols, dude.
You're easier to push when you're already leaning, you know? It's
It reminds me of Coast to Coast. Like, I knew some people were calling, I'm like, oh, that's government. They're pushing some government stuff. I'm like, how do you know that guy wasn't sent in?
That's interesting. I wouldn't doubt it, dude.
Send in, be like, hey, started this theory about Paul, and it just got the ball rolling.
Yeah. Guys, let me tell you about our friends at Mint Mobile. When we were kids, summer meant freedom, no homework, no teachers, no school. As adults, summer means freedom thanks to Mint Mobile's summer sale. Right now, all Mint Mobile plans are $15 per month, even unlimited. So free yourself from big wireless and their gimmicks and gotchas and switch to Mint for high-speed data coverage on the T-Mobile 5G network. I love Mint Mobile. I love everything about Mint Mobile.
Mint Mobile took what's wrong with wireless and made it right with premium wireless for $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your current phone and your number. You can choose from 3, 6, or 12-month plans and say goodbye to a monthly bill. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile. It's so easy. Sign up online and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month.
To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/tinfoil. That's mintmobile.com/tinfoil. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month. mintmobile.com/tinfoil. That's it. There's no catch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months plan required, $15 per month equivalent, taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Includes up to 20 gigabyte hotspot. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
Guys, listen, I want to tell you about our good friends at ElevenLabs. Listen, how many times have you called somebody for a business inquiry and they just don't even know what's going on? It's like these people are tired. They're answering the same 3 questions all day long. It's like it's chaos, dude. And that's why ElevenLabs has fixed this up, and it's perfect for your business.
11 Agents is a platform for AI voice and chat agents that can actually listen, understand, and resolve customer issues. They can look up your account, process requests, and hand off to a person when needed. 11 agents help create better experiences for customers while letting call center and support teams focus on the issues that need an actual human. And it's made by ElevenLabs, the AI research and product company known for their realistic voice and audio models in over 70 languages. If you've heard AI voices that actually sound expressive and natural, there's a good chance it was ElevenLabs. It's built for enterprise scale, too. 11 Agents handles more than 10 million conversations per week with SOC2, HIPAA, and PCI certifications, regional data residency, and even forward-deployed engineers who can work alongside your team to get agents into production.
If you run a business or handle customer operations across support, sales, or marketing, you can start with a demo at ElevenLabs.io/tinfoil. See how 11 agents can fit into your workflow and help build experiences that your customers will actually love. ElevenLabs.io/tinfoil. That's ElevenLabs.io/tinfoil. And we thank them for sponsoring the show.
Think about it. In 1964, you had to get 78 million people watching CBS the night of Ed Sullivan. Now, you've got, hundreds of millions or billions of people walking around with their smartphone, and they're scrolling, and it's sending back information about you. When did you stop scrolling? What did you stop? Which Instagram post did you stop on? Did you pause? What's on your playlist? What are you sharing?
What are you
all of
watching?
This information. Exactly. What are you watching? How long are you watching? When did you fall asleep? What did you fall asleep to? What are you listening to while you're asleep? It's all right here, and we're sleeping with it right by our head. You don't need. I mean, the power they have now because of the ubiquitousness of the phone is. They don't need to necessarily. I mean, it was pretty primitive back in the 60s. We'll take this band, we'll have them play these riffs, and we'll see if they can influence the culture. They were successful, but they don't need to do that anymore. It's all right in the phone. We're all and we're accepting of it. We're accepting of it.
They do something
We
like
welcome
that.
it.
They do something like that with gospel music. They'll play music at the churches, and they figure out which ones work, and they throw those on the airways. On like which albums work, and they're just testing it on the people at church. If the people at the church start singing back, they're like, "Oh, this one's good. Let's push this band."
It's so
They're just testing
interesting.
it.
Rappers do that at strip bars.
Oh, really?
They'll be like, "Is this going to be a hit?" They'll play it in strip bar. If the girls start dancing, they know they got a hit.
Yeah, they're testing out.
That's so interesting.
They're testing it out.
I want to say about the Beatles, too, I don't think it's any coincidence that Paul and John, their mothers died when they were young. I think they probably, if they were targeted, it would be partly for that. And
Everything's data.
yeah, and John's father, too, was like absent. So I think they were particularly likely to, be manipulated.
Everything is data. They're watching everybody. I mean, you have some stuff about Kurt Cobain, but it's everything is data, dude. We just did something on Gates' program. They're all now they have to send people into schools to find out who's this and who's that. It's like, why'd they use Charles Manson? This guy, he had something, he had energy. They can manipulate him. He had that Elvis factor that we talked about. People got behind him, gets arrested, gets kicked, released from jail instantly. Someone makes a call, get him out of jail. And then they start sending people to him to blow him up, to make it's like, it's all data, dude. Everything is data. They're constantly watching. And it's like, before that, they would go to these campuses and they would talk to these professors, who's the loudest, who's the most passionate, and they would just study this stuff. It's a whole thing like why Pornhub is free. What are you watching? Who's commenting? Who's commenting on the shadiest videos on Pornhub?
Like, how much data do you think they got off the Candace Owens, Andrew Wilson? It's got 5.2 million views already. How much data did they get off of that? Who's watching it? Who's liking it? Who left comments? Who watched the whole thing?
Maybe it's more about like divide and conquer with that video, but it's possible. But
it's just data, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, it's just like that causes again, going back to like programming people into, oh man, you got to be behind this assassination. You got to fight for the truth. Good guy, bad guy, all that stuff. Yeah. The 60s were a crazy time. The whole thing was a giant CIA psyop. I mean, you got stuff about Jimi Hendrix, but also like the Grateful Dead. I mean, I don't know how good that music is. I don't think it's it's bad. You're playing stadiums and people are following you around. You're the band for the CIA's acid manufacturer. And then they're like, yeah, dude, we're just going to throw you up there and we're going to load everybody with acid, and they're just going to associate acid with your music, and they're going to follow you around and do nothing with their lives.
Yeah, and people forget LSD was legal up until I think 1966, and the guy that was making LSD or acid, not only for the Grateful Dead, who were originally called the Warlocks, they were just playing in they were the house band in some pizza parlor in Haight-Ashbury, and they hook up with this guy Stanley Owsley. Or Owsley Stanley, my apologies. Owsley Stanley. He was making up batches of LSD in his bathtub at Berkeley, and he provided LSD to all, the Beach Boys, you name it. It was all Owsley Stanley acid, and he also became kind of their not their tour manager, but he was the guy that came up with this idea of stacking all these amplifiers. It was the Owsley Stanley wall of sound. We attribute that to Phil Spector, but in concert, it was Stanley who came up with this idea. All these amps stacked on, and everybody's tripping out on LSD, and Jerry Garcia is playing like a 28-minute solo. I agree. I mean, I like some of their music, but they were the house band for the Merry Pranksters. And Ken Kesey, the guy that wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he was driving that bus, and they were just handing out free LSD, and people were tripping out. And Ken Kesey, reportedly, along with, was it Robert Hunter, who he didn't perform with the Dead, but he co-wrote most of their music with Jerry Garcia. They were both involved in an LSD program at Stanford University, which is interesting. So, yeah, it's the hippie movement and the whole Summer of Love thing. It may have originally been this organic happening, but as soon as the elites take notice of, oh, look there's this happening over here, we better get in there and make use of it, and amplify it and steer it, just the same as Beatlemania. That's what they did. I mean, Charlie Manson, you mentioned, he's hanging out in the same neighborhood in Haight-Ashbury, recruiting his family, as MKUltra scientist Dr. Jolly West was. Coincidence? I think not. And I spoke with an MKUltra survivor recently on my podcast, and she says that she was, now, can I verify this as truth? No, I can't. But according to her, Michael Aquino, who was a Satanist who achieved a very high status in the U.S. military, Michael Aquino and herself and Charlie Manson were all part of the same MKUltra program, for what it's worth. So
everybody goes through their Jimi Hendrix phase of their life. They go to college, you're smoking pot, you're listening to Jimi Hendrix. Waterfall's one of my favorite songs of all time. What's your thoughts on Jimi Hendrix?
Jimi Hendrix, I think, like the Beatles, the machine got behind him. He was managed by this guy, Michael Jeffrey, who was kind of a sinister guy. The music industry from the mid-'50s up until probably the mid-'70s, maybe a little bit later, was like the Wild West. You had gangsters and assassins and look at Led Zeppelin's manager, Peter Grant. That guy was a thug. I mean, he'd throw people down the stairwell. Don Arden, the manager of Black Sabbath, and ELO. They called him the Al Capone of rock. Well, Mike Jeffrey was in the British intelligence corps. He was said to be a killer. He would tell people, I can kill you with my baby finger. And he served in the Suez Canal crisis in 1956 with British intelligence. He got his hooks into Jimi Hendrix. He made himself indispensable to Hendrix. He would stage kidnappings. Hendrix had no idea what was happening. He was in New York, in Greenwich Village.
What?
He gets lured out of a club, and he gets thrown into the back of a van and held hostage in an apartment. And the kidnappers supposedly call Mike Jeffrey, and Mike Jeffrey then contacts his fixer in New Jersey, who brings in his mobsters, and they somehow miraculously they know where Jimi Hendrix is being held, and they free Jimi Hendrix from the clutches of this gang. And Mike Jeffrey swoops in like the savior, the knight in shining armor, and says, "I rescued you, Jimmy. You've got to stick with me, because without me, you're going to be like a lamb thrown to the wolves."
Whoa.
Same thing happened to Toronto in 1970. Jimi Hendrix lands in Toronto. By this time, he's free of heroin. He's clean. He's traveling with Kathy Etchingham, his girlfriend. She knew he was clean. The customs people find drug paraphernalia in his suitcase. And he looks at Kathy astonished. He goes, "I'm clean. That's not mine. I didn't put that there." He was facing probably 20 years in jail. 1970 in Toronto. They didn't mess around. Now everything's legal up here. But again, Mike Jeffrey swoops in. Former intel, they say once CIA, always CIA. Probably the same with MI5 and MI6. He's got connections. He gets Jimi Hendrix off the charges. And once again, he comes to Jimmy, "See what I do for you, Jimmy? Without me, you're nothing." He stages these things. This is, again, classic MKUltra. And he toured Jimi Hendrix. He ran him ragged. Physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. And there was no rhyme or reason to where Jimmy would be touring. Instead of, going up and down the East Coast or into the Midwest, he'd be all over the map. It was deliberate. He was trying to wear Jimmy down. And Jimi Hendrix was signing things. He didn't know what he was signing. He was signing his life away. And I talked to, he's in the book, Juma Sultan played percussion for Jimi Hendrix. You'll recall Jimi Hendrix closed the show at Woodstock, and that Star-Spangled Banner that he played. Well, he wasn't with the Jimi Hendrix Experience at this point. It was the band was called Gypsies, Sun, and Rainbows. And Juma Sultan played percussion. Billy Cox was on bass, and Jimi Hendrix. And Juma Sultan told me, we tried to tell Jimmy, Mike Jeffrey's no good for you. He's stealing from you. There are offshore accounts. You got to get away from this guy. And so Jimmy decided he was going to, when the contract expired, and it was about to expire in September of 1970, meanwhile, Mike Jeffrey had taken out a life insurance policy on his cash cow, Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, my God.
And Hendrix supposedly, suffers barbiturate poisoning, had taken 9, I think they're called Vasparax or something, these barbiturates, 9 of them, seriously, and he aspirates on his own vomit. Now, when they wheel him into St. Mary Abbott's Hospital in London, the attending physician, Dr. John Bannister, first thing he notices is Jimi Hendrix's hair is soaked in red wine. His clothes are drenched with red wine. His lungs are filled with red wine. Now, there might be a little bit in the stomach, but not enough to cause him to aspirate on that much red wine. He basically concluded, he didn't even know who Jimi Hendrix was. He didn't know. He just saw this, young black man in the emergency room. And he basically thought, this guy's been drowned. He's been drowned in red wine. Sounds an awful lot like waterboarding. Something that Mike Jeffrey would have been very familiar with. Oh, so there are a lot of suspicious things going on with Jimmy's death. And again, just that's a common theme, a common thread in my book is this rush to judgment. Young rock star, suicide or accidental overdose, let's move on. Same thing happened with Kurt Cobain. Same thing happened with Brian Jones and even Elvis.
Now, is the desire to off them is so they control their rights?
Well, with Mike Jeffrey, and again, let me say this, because of his intelligence contacts and involvement in the intelligence community, I don't think he would have been able to pull that off, the cover-up, without some help from people in high places, meaning, MI6 or whomever. But Mike Jeffrey was indebted to the mob as well for tens of millions of dollars. And he knew that he was about to lose Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was not going to renew the contract. So it was that life insurance policy, I believe, in that case.
Wow, dude. Wow. Elvis like that as well?
With Elvis, and it's unfortunate because, and we just passed the 49th anniversary. Next year is going to be pivotal because his autopsy was sealed for 50 years. Next year is the 50th anniversary.
And that's never a good sign.
Yeah. Why do
When
you do
something's,
that?
we just gotta seal this till everyone's dead. That's whenever we go, we're gonna seal this for this long. That's never good.
Yeah. What the other thing that's sad is Elvis has become kind of a caricature. You know, we think of Elvis overweight in Las Vegas, or he faked his death, and I saw him in flipping burgers at a Burger King in Kalamazoo. Elvis is alive. He faked his death. I present the case that Elvis, in fact, was murdered, and there's a number of things going on. First of all, this rush to judgment by Dr. Jerry Francisco, who was the medical examiner in Shelby County, where Memphis is located. Dr. Francisco was also the chief medical examiner when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis 9 years earlier, and there was a rush to judgment there. In terms of, you know, the trajectory of the bullet that killed Dr. King and where it may have come from and so forth. And we know that whole case was a cock-up and a setup, as you alluded to earlier. So Dr. Jerry Francisco immediately rushes to judgment, even before he gets a toxicology report back, and says, oh, Elvis died of a heart attack on the toilet. And then they had 3 toxicology reports performed, 2 of them, and this was the other portrait of Elvis. Oh, he was a hopeless drug addict, and Dr. Nicopolis was feeding his habit, and he should go to jail. 2 of the toxicology reports found therapeutic levels only of prescribed medication in Elvis. The 3rd toxicology report is a real outlier, and it was performed at the Biosciences Lab in California. According to that toxicology report, and it's very strange, they claim Elvis had something like 7 to 11 times the lethal amount of codeine in his system. Well, that's complete BS. Everybody around Elvis knew he was allergic to codeine. He had had an anaphylactic seizure or anaphylactic event many, many years earlier when he had some codeine. He never went near it. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of his prescribed medications. They were very careful. Everybody knew that. In fact, I quote a Dan Warlick in the book. Warlick attended the autopsy. It's not all sealed. We know this from Warlick later. He held Elvis's larynx in his hand during the autopsy. Imagine one of the greatest voices of the 20th century. Wow. He's got the larynx in his hand. There was no sign of inflammation or swelling or if you have codeine, an allergy to codeine, your larynx swells up. No sign of that. They also dissected Elvis's heart, something like 300 times, one of the most studied hearts in human history. There was no sign of some impending cardiac event. Was Elvis a little overweight? Yes, he was.
Who isn't?
But he had underwent a very rigorous physical exam just weeks earlier because he was getting set to go on tour at the time of his passing once again. In fact, the day that he died, he was supposed to perform in, I think, Portland, Maine, and begin another leg of his tour. But that physical exam, he was given a clean bill of health by the life insurance company. So there's a lot of questions. There's also Elvis's involvement with the FBI. The Presleys were involved in an FBI investigation called Operation Fountain Pen. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, he was the victim here, just to be clear. Vernon Presley was trying to sell or lease one of Elvis's private planes. He had 2 of them. One was called the Hound Dog 1, and the other was the Hound Dog 2. He was trying to lease or sell Hound Dog 2 to this company, which was a front for the mob. And so the FBI were trying to get Elvis and or his father to testify. Now, was he necessarily the star witness? Did it all hang on Elvis's testimony? Not necessarily, but if you imagine Elvis Presley in the witness stand testifying against, these mobsters, not a good story for the mob. Also, Elvis is performing in Las Vegas because his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, not his real name, and he wasn't a colonel. He was an illegal immigrant from Holland, came to the United States, snuck in, may have been involved in manslaughter. He could never leave the country. That's why Elvis never went on tour around the world. Elvis should have been
everywhere.
I think when he died, he had like $1 million in the bank because Colonel Tom Parker took 50%, Sam. Have you ever heard of such a thing? A manager taking 50% of every penny you earn? So Colonel Parker, like Mike Jeffrey, was also indebted to the mob. He ran up huge gambling debts in Las Vegas. That's why he had Elvis performing there nonstop to pay off his debts. FBI also infiltrated Elvis's entourage, I believe with Elvis's permission, and were spying on the mob in Vegas, and the mob knew it. And they're saying to Parker, you better do something about your boy. You know, he's spying on us.
Elvis was a spy?
Well, people inside his entourage, maybe even members of his backup band, were FBI
informants.
Agents.
Whoa!
Yeah, they were spying on the mob in Las Vegas. So they kept pressuring Colonel Tom Parker. You better do something about your boy. This is not good. And so Parker was feeling the heat. But also Colonel Tom Parker, now today we take it for granted merchandising, and you see an artist on T-shirts and buttons and bumper stickers. And this was in its infancy in the mid to late 70s. It was just starting, and Colonel Tom Parker formed his own corporation to market Elvis this way. And he was making a killing. Elvis T-shirts, Elvis buttons. And Elvis was starting to wear down a little bit because Parker, like Jimi Hendrix and Mike Jeffrey, was running him into the ground. If Elvis was too sick to perform because he had the flu, Parker would say, you get him out of bed and get him on that stage. They would stick Elvis's head in a bucket of ice to revive him. And Colonel Parker realized at a certain point, this is too much trouble. He's worth more dead than alive.
That's crazy.
That's Michael Jackson.
Yeah, same thing. He was about to go on tour. Michael was about to go on tour.
Oh,
yeah,
before they offed him.
The Kurt Cobain stuff seems to be popping up again. That they reopened. We can get Kurt Cobain. I also want to get into the Robert Johnson and Gary Patterson selling of the souls real quick before we let you go. Kurt Cobain, what are your thoughts?
Well, it is timely because I think it was earlier this year, maybe February, I want to say, or late 2025, there was an independent team of forensic analysts. These were not court appointed. They basically sort of deputized themselves and decided to petition King County in Washington, where Seattle is located, to see if either the DA's office or the police or the medical examiner's office would reopen the case. They refused. So the case remains closed. And of course, Kurt Cobain was cremated after his death. So, it would be difficult. There are people that you could impanel a grand jury and put some people on the stand, no question. So there's the whole timeline around Kurt Cobain's death. He's discovered April 5th in a room above his detached garage that had been converted into a green room. An electrician found him sprawled on the floor with a shotgun and, of course, blood splatter and so forth. And a suicide note, so-called, and supposedly had something like 2 to 3 times the lethal amount of, I'm going to say brown because the H word I think is verboten on, I don't want to get you in trouble on YouTube or wherever, but morphine, it metabolizes as morphine in the bloodstream. We're expected to believe that he had 2 to 3 times the lethal dose in his system, yet still managed to take a shotgun, which is a cumbersome weapon, stick it in his mouth. And I don't know if you've handled a shotgun, if you're a hunter. Imagine sticking the barrel in your mouth and then trying to reach the trigger with your other finger. You can't do it. It's if you can, you must have arms like Abraham Lincoln or something. But in addition, there was a flash suppressor attached to the end of the barrel, which adds another 6 inches. So, what? Maybe he pulled the trigger with his big toe? No, he was wearing shoes. He had his shoes on. So there's that. There's also the what's called the blood backspatter, and that's blood pattern analysis. So when someone is shot, the backspatter goes towards the source of the force, or the source of in this case, the rifle. So there is back spatter on that flash muzzle, and his Cobain's one hand was very close, like he was holding it supposedly by the flash by the flash suppressor, the barrel. There was no back spatter of these blood droplets on his hand, which should have been there, which is interesting. Also, the amount of, I hate to be graphic, but the brain material you would expect to find, on the walls and so forth. That seemed to be, there wasn't as much blood as we would have expected. So, was that scene staged? Perhaps. Also, if you've got 2 to 3 times the lethal dose in your, how do you manage not only to manage that weapon, but also the whole drug paraphernalia kit had been neatly and tidily, packed away and moved to one side. You put the needles back in the case and so forth. That's very strange. And then you have this so-called suicide note, which was found near the body. It had been stabbed into a flower pot, into the soil with a red pen. The first chunk of the note doesn't really read like a suicide note. It's more like, I'm walking away from the business. I'm sick and tired of it. He was basically saying to his fans, thanks for everything, but it's time for me to step away. I want to spend more time with my daughter. So there's that. That's 95% of the note. The last 5% doesn't match at all. In fact, 3, again, these are not court appointed. These are independent handwriting analysts have looked and said they don't match. The 5% of the note seemed to have been tacked on. It doesn't match Kurt's handwriting. And in that 5% of the note, he talks about, Courtney and Frances Bean, you'd be better off without me. And that reads like, a suicide note. Now, their lawyer, Rosemary Carroll, was recorded in a conversation with investigator Tom Grant. And in that recording, Rosemary Carroll reveals that she found what she called practice sheets in Courtney Love's backpack, allegedly, reportedly.
Oh my God!
As if she were trying to practice Kurt's handwriting. These are all allegations. It's never been proven in court. And Courtney has, denied any wrongdoing in the case. But that's what's out there. So we also know that Kurt, according to Rosemary Carroll, the lawyer was planning on changing the will. In fact, it had all been drafted, but he hadn't signed it yet. That would have directed all of the royalties to Frances Bean, his daughter, not to Courtney Love. Remember, after his death, Kurt Cobain is consistently listed among the top earners among, dead celebrities. His estate would have been worth billions of dollars. So we also have the testimony of a character by the name of Eldon Hoke, whose stage name was El Duce. Now, we have to take this with a grain of salt. Maybe not the most credible of witnesses, but he was filmed a documentary by Nick Broomfield called Kurt and Courtney that was released several years after Kurt's death. On film, El Duce claims that Courtney came to him and offered him, I forget what the amount was, $10,000, $25,000 to kill Kurt with a shotgun. El Duce said he laughed in her face and said, "You're not serious." And she allegedly responded, "I'm as serious as a heart attack." Several days after that filming, El Duce was found dead on the railroad tracks.
Yeah, and there's also some weird shit with Dave Navarro that, and like Dave Navarro, this revisionist history of him, like he tells this famous story about how he got beat up at a Republican convention. But what nobody knows is that his dad was the speechwriter for Reagan. Like he was
Dave
there
Grohl or Dave Navarro?
Dave Grohl.
Okay, you said Dave Navarro.
Oh, sorry, Dave Grohl. My apologies, everybody. Dave Grohl. Thank you, Johnny. Yeah.
Well, he also has language about selling his soul in like a Rolling Stone article.
Oh yeah, it's really creepy too.
Yeah, really creepy.
And now how he's had basically 2 band members die on him. The one guy with the heart, the last drummer that he forced him to get the shot.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like
Hawkins.
And that, like, it's really crazy, but there was a lot of stuff going on. Him realizing that Courtney was more than what he thought. Her connections to the CIA, going back to the Grateful Dead, her dad, what her dad did to her, what was done to her in these mental facilities. Really dark shit. How the CIA used her as kind of a cockroach to infiltrate these drug scenes, introduce everybody to heroin. And it's like crazy to me, dude, how dark that shit really got, and how he was going to kick out Dave Grohl. The rumor was Dave Grohl was out of the band, and Dave Grohl has very elite connections through his father. and like his father and Courtney Love's father were supposedly the bankrollers of Nirvana and the movement of Nirvana to help usher in grunge and kick out like heavy metal. And like this is back in the day where there was no internet. So like if you didn't get radio play, you were dead. Nobody knew about you. There was no way to keep your. Now it's like it's harder for people like Gundam style. That guy still crushes it because the internet. Psy still crushed it because he has the internet to connect with his fans, so he's still in their face. If this was 20, 30 years ago, nobody'd be talking about Psy anymore because out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. So it was a totally different time, man. And it was like, it's just like, oh man, it's so creepy and dark. And like just listening to Richard talk about, like, I don't think people realize how many of these guys die. Like we just talked about that Hayden chick. What's her name, Johnny?
Panettiere.
And how she just comes out about this, like she was 18 and she was forced into a bedroom by the female on the boat to hook up with this old rocker.
Yeah, and her ex-husband was with the bank, Barclays Bank, and according to some Epstein files, allegedly, I guess, her husband took part in some of these trafficking, parties and so forth.
The Klitschko's are also been associated with trafficking out of the Ukraine. It's dark, bro.
We know. I mean, who runs the show here, right? It's Satan is running the show, and I'm a Orthodox Christian. I believe in angels and demons and an unseen world, and I know that may sound, I don't know, off-putting or to some people, but I believe that is the truth. I believe it 100%. And, and in the book, Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, I don't claim that I've found the truth necessarily. I'm asking questions. When we're talking about Elvis and Kurt Cobain, these cases need to be reopened and reinvestigated. Brian Jones, another example, founder of the Rolling Stones, found dead at the bottom of his swimming pool. Jimi Hendrix, who we mentioned, and there's so many others. A rush to judgment. And I believe in the influences of the occult, whether it's done maybe somewhat innocently for marketing purposes. It's an invitation nonetheless. And when you keep knocking on that door, even if you think you're just being silly or funny or it's, for branding purposes, eventually something's going to answer.
Yeah.
Talking about Cobain too, his suicide note is addressed to an Bada, this imaginary friend. It's like the first word of his, which is bizarre. It's a friend. He says in the suicide note, he's like, since age 7, I've not been able to appreciate life. Basically, it's been a downhill thing since then. And that's when his parents got divorced and he invented, or this imaginary friend appeared in his mind, and he literally addresses his suicide note to Bada, whatever. It's bizarre, dude.
It sounds really like a demon or something.
It's weird.
Bada.
It's weird.
But even if you go into the suicide note based on what Richard's told us, he wants to step away and spend time with his daughter, and then he's like, "You're better off without me."
And he's so right about the handwriting too. By the way, once it gets into that, like at the very last few lines is completely different.
And by the way, Courtney Love got in trouble again for setting up a murder of her daughter's ex-fiance. Her daughter had gifted her fiance at the time a guitar from Kurt. And then it didn't work out. And the guy's like, "No, dude, I'm keeping the guitar. That was a gift to me." And Courtney wanted it back. And she got busted basically putting a hit out on him.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Really?
That did not make it into the book. I wish it had. But I'll tell something else that I learned after the fact. And again, the book is based on the podcast, which I produced back in 2018. And I tried to update certain things. I only learned fairly recently that the person who performed the autopsy on Kurt Cobain, he's since passed, 2002, a base jumping accident in Switzerland. But he later, after Kurt's death, said that he should have recused himself from the case because he had a friendship with Courtney Love. Now, if you read his statement, you might infer that it was more than just a friendship, that they were intimate. Can you imagine? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. The guy that performs the autopsy on Kurt Cobain is allegedly intimate or having an affair with Courtney Love? Come on.
Unbelievable, dude.
Dude, and it's that whole 27 club. Like, how many of them die at the age of 27?
Why is it 27? It's super interesting.
Jim Morrison died there. So did like Mac Miller.
That numerology with that. One of my favorite movies of all time is Crossroads. It's. I remember watching, going, "This is such a good movie." It's about a guy who sells his soul and tries to get it back, right, by having his new guitar sensation battle the devil again. And it all comes down to Robert Johnson and all that story. Now, how much of Robert Johnson do you think is true, the lore of that?
Well, the crossroads, the idea of making a deal at the crossroads, and just to set the scene. So in the 1930s, Robert Johnson is a sharecropper, the son of a sharecropper, and he's living in the Mississippi Delta. Life was, pretty harsh, pretty brutal. And so your ticket out, one of them, and there weren't a lot of options, was to become, like a Delta blues player and play in the juke joints, and you have all the attention of the lovely ladies and all the whiskey you could drink for free. It was escapism, and so that's what Robert Johnson wanted for himself, and he hung around some pretty credible musicians. One was named Son House, and eventually they kind of chased Robert Johnson away because he tried to learn to play, but he was, to be kind, he was mediocre at best. He disappears for a year, and a year later, and Son House and his band are in a parking lot at a juke joint taking a smoke break in between sets, and all of a sudden they hear this incredible music, this incredible guitar work, and they rush back into the bar. And up there on stage, with his back turned to the audience, playing the Delta Blues like nobody else, was Robert Johnson. And it was really Son House who came up with this idea that he must have made a deal with the devil. Now, the thing is, Robert Johnson was very coy. He never said, no, it's not true. He kind of encouraged that. And it was reflected in his songs, Hellhounds on My Trail and the Crossroads. And then he would admit that he rehearsed, he practiced endlessly at night in cemeteries, and so then it was sort of inferred, I guess, to fill in the legend that maybe the devil himself was his teacher, was teaching him to play in the cemetery. Now, the idea of a crossroads is very old. It goes back probably further than medieval Europe. It may go back all the way to ancient Greece and Africa. There was many cultures, there's a story of the cursed crossroads. In fact, during the witch trials in Europe, when a witch was executed, drowned, or burnt, they would often bury the remains at a crossroads because it was considered unhallowed ground. You couldn't put them in a cemetery. So according to the legend, on a moonless night in Clarksdale, Mississippi, at the intersection of, I believe it's Highway 61 and 40-something, there's a marker there to this day. You can go to Clarksdale, Mississippi. You can see the spot. And he shows up on a moonless night. He turns his back to Old Scratch, as they called the devil in the Deep South back then. Old Scratch. You turn your back to him and you hand your guitar over your left shoulder. And the devil does a particular tuning and hands it back, and you've consummated the deal. And again, he shows up a year later, and he's this brilliant guitarist, and Son House cannot believe it. It just says it's not possible. It's not possible. So how did this happen? Well, shortly after achieving considerable fame, and I think he recorded several dozen records. He makes kind of a rookie mistake in a bar one night. He accepts a drink from an open bottle of whiskey from a stranger. Now you have to understand, Robert Johnson was enjoying the ladies, and there were a lot of jealous husbands and bartenders and boyfriends out there. The next day, Robert Johnson is on his knees in utter agony, howling, like a hellhound for like a day and a half, and he finally dies. It's believed he died from either strychnine or arsenic poisoning, probably placed in that bottle of whiskey from a jealous husband, or was that old Scratch, using that individual to collect his debt. So that's the legend. How much of that is true? I can't answer that. I mean, again, I think we all they call that the Faustian bargain. I think we all make Faustian bargains. Or we're at least tempted. Do we sign a contract in our own blood? I don't necessarily think it's that overt. But, people have to make up their own mind as to what happened to Robert Johnson. How did he turn from a mediocre at best guitar player? A year later, he's just like a genius, a musical genius. And he's considered like the grandfather of rock and roll, the great-grandfather of rock and roll. And his music has been covered by Eric Clapton and Led Zeppelin and the Allman Brothers and so forth. And they all have stories to tell about, that song, The Crossroads, and strange things that have happened to them. And I've talked about Robert Johnson and The Crossroads on a number of programs, and always something happens. I was just down in Washington, D.C. I was on OANN, One American News Network, with John Hines. And I got to the Robert Johnson story, and one of the studio lights just went poof like that. It broke, it went out. So they had to take 10 minutes and replace it. Another time I was on Coast to Coast AM talking about The Crossroads and Robert Johnson. And I was doing the show remotely from the Toronto affiliate, and all of a sudden the internet went down in LA, where the show emanates from, the broadcast studio. And I was knocked off the air for an hour. It happened another time while I was recording a podcast on my... I was using Adobe Audition. I recorded an interview with Matt Swain, an author, and the WAV files looked good. Finished the interview, hung up the phone, went back to listen to it, and it was just all gobbledygook. It was just useless. I couldn't use it. I had to re-record the interview.
That's crazy.
So,
God help us on this episode. Johnny, you better secure this shit.
Oh, you got the backup ready.
So who is this? I don't know if I know, but R. Gary Patterson?
Yeah.
Who is that?
R. Gary Patterson. I dedicate the book to R. Gary. He was my
that's your
partner,
buddy. Yeah, that's right.
collaborator
Okay,
and friend. And we were about to launch this idea that became a book. Started out as an idea for a terrestrial radio show called The Spirit of Rock. We were about to launch the show. He called me on a Friday, May 16th, 2017, to tell me the meeting that we had lined up with the general managers the following Monday had to be rescheduled because he had forgotten that was Memorial Day. And so again, it's a Friday night, May 16th. It's pitch black out. I remember distinctly looking out the windows, and this is spring. I mean, it gets dark here up in Toronto, maybe 8 o'clock, 8:30. But it was dark. Maybe it was 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Anyway, he said some strange things during that phone call, like, "You're a really cool dad." And I just thought, wow, that's strange. But Gary was affable. He never had a crossword to say to anybody. But at the end of the phone call, I said, so it's Memorial Day weekend. Are you going to have a barbecue? Because that's what I think of when I think of Memorial Day in the U.S. I think of parades and family barbecues. And for the first time in the years, I knew him maybe a decade or more, he seemed really curt and cross with me. And he said, "No, there'll be no barbecue." And I thought, oh, geez, did I just step in a family dispute or a landmine? What's going on? So I just left it there. The call ends. The next day I discover he dies. I thought that's impossible. I just talked to him last night. Anyway, I fly down to Oliver Springs, Tennessee for the funeral. There's Gary decked out in his stainless steel blue coffin with his Fender guitar and a stand in front of him. His brother Mike, older brother Mike, standing there in the receiving line. Went up, introduced myself. And I didn't want to tell him about the phone call I had that night, the last, the night before he died. I said, "Mike, what time did Gary pass?" And he said, "Oh, it was about 5 o'clock." And I'm thinking, that doesn't compute. 5 o'clock on the Friday, I talked to him. It was dark. And I didn't want to divulge. I just thought it was weird, not the place or time to say, I got a call from your brother after he died. So then I asked him, I said, well, the last time I spoke to him, I asked him whether he was having a Memorial Day barbecue. And I said, Gary got kind of cross with me, and he just said, there will be no barbecue. And as soon as I said that, Mike looked confused. He said that? I said, yeah. He said, there'll be no barbecue. I said, what's that all about? And he said, that's odd. He said, the day Gary died, he spent all afternoon looking for a barbecue. He finally found one. He spent $500, and he spent the rest of the afternoon up until he died putting that thing together on his backyard, his back patio, rather. So he died before the barbecue. And his last words to me, there will be no barbecue. I'm conflicted by that every day, and it's been over 9 years now. I don't know what to make of it. It doesn't square with my faith. You know, we don't believe in communication from the dead. I don't know what happened. The thing is, I checked my phone just to verify that I spoke to someone on that Friday, that Gary had called me. There was no incoming or outgoing calls on the Friday.
What?
Damn.
Nobody called me. But my wife witnessed it. She saw me wandering around the house with the phone to my ear. And when I found out Gary died on the Saturday morning, I rushed upstairs to her bedroom, and without me saying a word, she saw I had this ashen look on my face. What's wrong? She said. I said, Gary died. And she said, without me prompting her, you were just talking to him last night. And I said, I thought so. I said, I thought so, but I just checked my phone. Nobody called me on Friday. I didn't call anybody on Friday. But on the Wednesday before the Friday, there was a call from Gary. I remember distinctly. We talked about the upcoming meeting that was going to happen in Knoxville. I remember exactly where I was. I was picking my boys up from Greek school. I was parked on Bayview Avenue at the All Saints Greek Orthodox Church, waiting for them to come out of Greek school. Gary called me. There was a log on my phone for that phone call, but nobody called me on Friday, and I called no one. And yet, listen, I could be misremembering everything. I freely admit that. I have no answers for what happened. But to the best of my ability and the best of my memory, that is the way it played out, and I have no explanation for it.
Wow.
Now, in your notes, are you saying he went down to a crossroad?
Yes. So we'll back up a few years, and Gary told me this story that, and he loved to talk about the Robert Johnson story, and he knew all about it. And one day he's having dinner with some of his fraternity brothers and their girlfriends and wives, and one of them, knowing that Gary's an encyclopedia in terms of the Delta Blues and the Crossroads story, says, Gary, let's all jump in our cars and go down to the Crossroads and make a pilgrimage. And so they do, and of course, they're in different cars, and they go down there, and they find a cemetery in close proximity to the Crossroads.
Sorry to cut you off, is there a specific crossroad that everyone knows is the crossroad?
Yeah, there's a marker there. It's the intersection of, I think it's Highway 61 and Route 40 something or other. You can go there, and there's an actual marker there saying this is the crossroads where, according to legend, Robert Johnson, made the deal and so forth. I mean, it's legendary, right? So Gary goes down there, and they find the cemetery, and they're imagining this is where Robert Johnson was practicing at night with the devil and learning how to play. And all of a sudden, he looks over to his right or to his left, and one of the girlfriends of his fraternity brothers has this big stick, and she's whacking at this big black snake that is sitting on top of a tombstone in the cemetery. And he goes over there, whoa, 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 what are you doing? Now, this is, like he said, I think he said it was late autumn, and typically you don't see snakes, out, in the summer, they're out sunning themselves. But here was this big black snake coiled around this tombstone, and she's whacking it with a stick, and he's saying, hey, remember the snake in the Garden of Eden and so forth. Not a good idea, not a good idea.
Whoa.
Anyway, in the meantime, they're snapping pictures in the cemetery at the Crossroads. They get home. None of the pictures turn out. None of them.
What?
But the other thing is, they decided one of the fraternity brothers has an idea that they're going to collect a memento of this, and they scoop up, and the crossroads are now paved, but, I guess on the shoulder or whatever, they scoop up some dirt, and they they have little baggies with them, and they each take some dirt home from the crossroads. And in the jumble of getting in and out of different cars, Gary gets separated from his bag of dirt. He gets home. He doesn't have his bag of dirt, but he gets home and the phone starts ringing. And one of the girlfriends of his fraternity brothers says, I don't know what her boyfriend's name was. Let's call him Joe. Says, Joe just had an aneurysm. We've taken him to hospital. It turns out he recovered. He was fine. Then he gets another call from a girlfriend, and she's in hospital, and she just had a heart attack, but she's recovering, and she's going to be fine. Then he gets a call from another one of the ladies, fraternity brothers' girlfriend or wives, and her house security alarm is going crazy. So at this point, Gary decides to play a little psychology, and he says, you know what? Take the bag of dirt, get it out of the house, and dump it into the river, which he does, and everything settles down and so forth.
Oh, my God.
So all of these things are happening. Eventually, Gary has a birthday. One of the fraternity brothers brings his bag of dirt as a present. He's put it in a nice little glass tube with a little brass plaque or something on it saying, the crossroads and the date. And Gary kept that on his desk right next to a crucifix that he had that was apparently blessed by the Pope. So I guess he figured one would cancel out the other. But yeah, a lot of weird things happening with the crossroads.
That is insane, dude. I'm telling you, don't dance with that shit. Don't even joke about it.
There's like a whole, I guess I'll show you how they have it
All right,
set
as
up
you're
over
doing
there.
that. So, Richard, we're going to end it up here. But I got to tell you something. So I'm blessed. My daughter, she's 6. And one of the things we like to do together is go watch movies. And I've been taking her to some movies. And I took her to Minions versus Monsters. And I've always loved the Despicable Me. It's really funny and it's good for adults and kids. But so we go see this movie. And they're running all these trailers for movies coming up because the Minions vs. Monsters is supposed to be big, so they're packing as many of these movie trailers in as they can. And you're seeing over and over and over and over again, animations for kids, and particular ones that I think are geared towards little girls. Almost every one of them is about witchcraft. This is programming very early, getting little girls to think it's kind of cool to look into witchcraft. It's always about a girl who it doesn't fit in, isn't one of the norms, which is what everyone feels about. You see that a lot in girls. I wasn't one of the cool chicks or the hot girls or the popular girls. I'm an outsider, and they all discover witchcraft, and then suddenly they have superpowers and can take on the world. In Despicable Me. Or the Minions, and I'm sorry if you haven't seen it yet. I'm not going to give away the plot, but I am going to talk about a moment in the movie. No. This one creature brings out basically the Book of the Dead.
Wow, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, yeah.
And does sorcery to conjure other monsters. It's so baked into children's entertainment that's really crazy to me.
Yeah, the entire culture is Luciferian.
It's all Luciferian and Malachian. It's all that. It's like, I've been saying this forever. What we're experiencing right now, it's like, sometimes I feel like, how lucky are we? Like, all these things that conspiracy theorists and religious people have been talking about forever is happening, even if it's not good. But it's like, it's happening in front of our eyes. And, the old gods want to come out and play. They're tired of sitting in the back. They want to be worshiped and they want sacrifice. And we're seeing it happen right here. And every kids movie is about a girl who does witchcraft now.
Yeah, it's all Baal worship, essentially. If you want to get right back to the ancient gods of the Canaanites, it's Baal worship, in different costumes, I suppose. But and the whole New Age movement, really. And the big thing now is, this manifestation. You can create your own reality. There's no, God has been totally expunged. from the public square. I mean, that's been going on since the early 1960s when they first got rid of prayer in public schools. There's just the hostility towards the church. For example, up here in Canada, we've had
It's
well
crazy,
over
dude.
100 churches that have been burned to the ground by left-wing terrorists, and the government doesn't even bat
And it's
an
all
eye.
Christianity too. It's
Yes.
really weird to me, not to get too weird and too off. And then I got one more thing I want to bring up to you is how many of these atheists are also Zionist. It's very weird to me. It's very weird that the people that don't believe in God also simultaneously believe God promised them certain people land. It's very weird to me. It's very satanic to me as well. And you're totally right. So the last thing I want to bring up to you, how old are your kids?
They'll be 20 actually in a couple of months. But we took them to all the Despicable Me movies, and that was one of my great pleasures too, taking my boys to
So
the,
your
the
kids
movies.
might be too old for this, but there's a series called Captain Underpants.
Oh,
and
yes, I remember. We had the books.
Oh, it's an old series. I read
Okay.
the books. It's an old series.
In
Book.
the movie that I watched, these two troublesome kids, these troublemakers and kids, are about to be expelled. Do you know what they do, man? They MKUltra their principal. It's literally MKUltra. They stick a ring in front of this teacher's face. On the ring is they've hijacked the symbol for the universe, and we all look at it as a pedophile symbol. But they take that symbol on the ring, put it in the principal's face, and they MKUltra him, and then he becomes this other person who runs around town in his underwear, thinking he's a superhero. And he causes great chaos throughout. That's MKUltra.
Yeah, and then he has no memory of it.
Yep.
He goes about his daily life as the school principal or whatever. Yeah, classic.
Just straight up programming, dude. It's crazy.
And then they
to me.
tell us about what they're doing in the culture. And because I guess there's some sort of pact. Part of the ritual is you've got to sign your masterpiece, right? You've got to tell people what you're doing, and that maybe they feel that absolves them. Well, we told you exactly what we're doing to you.
Yep.
So we're off scot free.
Yep, I agree, dude. And it's like this thing with, and we'll end it here, but the reason I think we haven't put major boots on the ground in Iran is that the sorcerers can't get us to give them permission. Like any other time in history, this war would have been full on already. Mm-hmm. You know, yes, we have they can do little things here and there, but major movements, which is like what 9/11 was about, traumatize us, like you say, and then we give them permission because we're so traumatized. And all you hear of these Zionists keep another 9/11 is going to happen. It's like, why is it only the Zionists saying this? I don't see any other group of people talking about another 9/11 happen. I think they've overplayed the hand. If it happens, everyone's going to agree who did it, and you're not going to convince anyone it was Iran. It just doesn't make any sense. But the reason Trump can't get boots on the ground is because King Solomon and these rules that he made with these demons is that one, they have to tell us what they're doing, and two, they need our permission. It's the famous scene from Lost Boys when the head vampire, I can't, yeah. You invite me in, you gotta invite me in. And then
that's a very ancient ritual. It's when you cross the threshold in your house, it's called the Threshold Covenant, and that goes back. That predates Judaism and Christianity.
Okay.
That's where they would put blood. They would put blood on the threshold. Yeah, it's ancient.
Hey, Richard, I'm gonna be honest with you. One of my favorite episodes ever, dude. You're a wonderful interview. You could tell you've been doing it for a long time, and you're a pro at it. So one more time, tell them where they can find your book and anything else you want to promote.
Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone came out July 9th. It's available online just about everywhere. Indigo, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can get more information at therockandrolltwilightsZone.com. There are some very wonderful endorsements from people like J.J. French from Twisted Sister and Mark Farner from Grand Funk Railroad and Steve Lukather from Toto and Ringo's
That's cool.
All-Star Band. There's a couple of sample chapters there at the rockandrolltwilightzone.com. You can also order it from the website. My podcast, Strange Planet, drops Monday, Wednesday, Friday. StrangePlanet.ca is the website, StrangePlanet.ca. Strange Planet on Instagram, TikTok, my YouTube channel, at Strange Planet Radio. That's everything,
Buddy,
I think.
I love you. Open door to come on anytime. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the book. I can't wait to read. I'm finishing this book. This will be the next book I read. And we appreciate you coming on, man.
Anytime, Sam. I'm going to be in LA the end of the month. Maybe we'll get together.
I would love to grab lunch, buddy. Anytime, dude. All right, guys. Let's break down the episode. All right, guys. What'd you guys think? Richard Syrett, man, I learned so much shit in that episode. I could listen to him talk forever.
He's great.
I could listen to him
it.
talk forever. You know?
And you could tell he had. I imagine that book is fascinating because you could tell he could have gone deeper and deeper. We just ran out of time because that guy's great. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic too, because there are just as many rock and roll stars as there are stories like that.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how many of these famous people die like really early? And the ones who don't die just have to tour and do everything forever.
It's dark, man.
It's like, what's a worse fate? Just have to be on the road at 90 like a rolling stone.
Or be
With
taken
no
out
direction home. You're like, that seems like hell too.
or be taken out at 40.
Yeah, I mean 40. You don't want 40. That sucks.
Dylan even calls it his never-ending tour. Is what it's called because it never stops.
Yeah, I mean your whole audience is gonna die before you get done fucking touring.
He's on tour with Willie Nelson, the Outlaw Country Tour.
What's this called? 200 years?
I went to see him last year, and Willie was sick, so Bob Dylan had a cover for Willie Nelson. I imagine that's something that happens a lot when you have two 90-year-old guys, yeah, just out touring. It's Did you watch the movie, the Dylan movie?
No,
it's not bad. Wasn't bad. Not great, but not bad.
But it's crazy, all that shit. Did you know anything about Jimi Hendrix like that or Elvis? Like we just bought he OD'd.
The thing about him looking like he was drowned was, and then that guy being intelligent. That's fascinating. I wonder. The thing about the Beatles is always I wonder what. Because he kind of explained it in a way that really got through to me. Because I had always thought because the Beatles' message mostly was benign to positive. It's like love and anti-war. But when he says the medium, it's more about the medium that resonates. It's not necessarily the message that they were.
But it's also this thing, Johnny, where they capture you in your fandom.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And then they introduce you weird shit. And then you gotta be like, what the fuck is then your anxiety kind of gets high. And then you start to go, oh, what's that about? Oh, what's that darkness about? And it was definitely, when he goes, we're bigger than Jesus, that's definitely some demonic shit.
Well, it's funny though, because he comes out and he apologized for that. He was like, I just meant like we're really popular. That's what he came out to say after. Because he read a story, he claimed that the church was declining in popularity, which it was around the time. And they were, of course, in their ascendancy. And I think by the numbers, it might have been true that more kids were listening to the Beatles than their preacher.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
It's like who put in the backwards messaging in? That subliminal stuff where you would play it backwards.
Yeah,
and I know you're going to say, it doesn't sound like it. Someone still kind of found it. Someone was like, let me play this backwards and see what I found.
The people who found it, I would be more suspicious of than.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And like the guy who just goes on a radio show and puts that out there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Johnny, does that kind of answer some questions for you about maybe it was just a psyop to sell a marketing tool?
Yeah. Because I feel that way about the Paul is Dead. Exactly what he said.
Do you remember when Jamie Foxx, everyone thought he was going to die, and then the weird looking Jamie Foxx talks just when he has a movie about cloning coming out?
It's creepy, isn't it?
Right? But they're not above that shit. They kind of learned, well, obviously, the Beatles were way before that, but, you know, there was a time when TMZ was taking down these giant stars. They took down Tom Cruise, they took down Angelina Jolie, and Hollywood freaked out. So they bought up TMZ. And then TMZ just started doing stories on empty calorie celebrities, and they would just destroy these reality stars who didn't care because they just wanted to see their name out there. And then it just became this train wreck kind of way of promotion, right? And then because the Chelsea Handler show was on the E! channel where all these reality stars were, all the comedians started seeing that. And that's when all the comics started getting in trouble for dumb shit they said that wasn't even that bad. And then after that, which was just used for promotion, right? Like when Leslie Jones, they announce that she is on Ghostbusters, that's when the video of her joke she used to do, which I had a similar joke to about first round draft pick moms. We both had that joke. And then they said that was insensitive to slavery and stuff. It was just a promotional thing. And then Saturday Night Live uses that as a way to promote. For the longest time, they were using that as a way to promote the upcoming season. Shane Gillis was that, right? Yeah, Shane Gillis said the K word when it comes to Jews. It's the only word I won't say because they don't say it. But they use that as promotion for the new season. And then everyone tunes in for the new season because of all the Shane Gillis stuff. They did it with my friend, another friend of mine that was on Saturday Night Live. That became say outrageous shit and then have all these bots act like you're upset. They're upset about it, which gets everybody talking. It's a magic trick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all, because anything that your energy is, that involves your energy being kind of
manipulated
up,
too.
Yeah, well, even once you get at that high state, it's more easily used, I think.
Go to samtripoli.com. You can get my events. They're right there, dude. Word War Debate is, okay, first of all, September 1st, I got to get something for that. September 1st, my special drops on youtube.com at Gas Digital. I'll have a link on my website for that. That drops there. And then September 12th is Word War Debate. Then I'm in Lawrence, Kansas. Then I'm in, keep going down. Then I'm in Looney Ben in Tulsa. Then I'm in Dallas at Truth or Con. I got to change that. Skankfest and closing out at the Mothership. So come see me out the Mothership. Check out all my dates. Word War Debate 2, we were talking about, click that. Takes you to November 12th is the big show. Adam Mockler versus CJ Pearson is the big one. Election integrity. Then we also have World War, we have God. Does he exist? Jay Dyer. And then finally, the one I'm most excited about, aliens versus angels and demons. And that is going to be our second debate. Then the Contender Series, which is kicking a lot of ass. Just grab your tickets at wordwardebate.com. And then check out my premium content. Just put up another one. Go up. Yeah, go right there. It is. Just did a fucking murder one. Whatever this is, Brad Binkley goes off on Candace Owens. But I have different shows. I'm going to start doing one with Shane Cashman. And then obviously I have the Kurt Metzger one, the Kurt and Sam Experiment. The best premium content on the internet, all on samtripoli.com. Johnny, talk about Cash Daddies.
Cash Daddies is a podcast where we talk about finance and investing and retirement, preparing for retirement. How Dewey is the what Sam calls the idiot savant of the show. He idiot because he tried to log into Cash Daddies today with the email being cashdaddyspodcast.com. And he's like, is that the email? And I'm like, did you put Gmail in the... He was trying to reset the password.
He's
and
such a boomer, dude.
Yeah. So I'm like, bro.
But hey, dude, my Uber and my Coca-Cola, both fucking crushing it right now. And I got that both from Cash Daddies. My goal is to buy just shit tons of Uber. Go down of Coca-Cola. Go down. Chaos Twins will be going very soon. I'm telling you, big news is coming up. And then, of course, my T-shirts. And I will get the new T-shirts up very soon.
This one's back. One of my favorites. My face is on it.
It's upside down, though.
It's $20, guys. $20.
$20
Where'd you get
for
a hat
T-shirt.
for 20?
What's better than that? Then go back, another one. And then gold and silver. All right. Anything else?
Hit that like button. Check out my YouTube channel, Actually Marks the Spy. Do reaction videos and leave a comment here on Tinfoil Hat, please.
And then go to the YouTube channel while we're here. And Johnny,
check out Broken Simulation. Please leave a review and whatever podcasting app you listen to. We'll follow you back on Twitter.
And then, of course, check out our YouTube channel. We're finally starting to get some views. Just go to youtube.com at Tinfoil Hat Official. That's mine.
That's yours.
I'm trying to get at Tinfoil Hat Official. I love how Tinfoil Hat Clips is. Click it. There we go.
Almost to 60,000, guys. We're one away. We're like literally less than 1,000 from 60,000. So please go subscribe. Hit that like button.
Subscribe. Help us grow. Help us grow.
We got the numbers. We got some 20,000s in there.
Yeah, we got some 20s.
Got some 20s. Look at
Yeah,
that.
dude. We're doing great. Very excited, dude. Very excited. Hopefully we'll get back in the 100,000s like we used to be. It's a long ways, but you never know, dude. Anything else?
Nope. Hit that like button. Go buy T-shirts, please.
All right, so it was a great episode. Learned a lot. And Richard's one of the best in the biz, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell that guy's been doing radio for a long time. He's like a pro, dude.
Dude, how crazy was that, him getting that phone call from his
Dude, that
dead
was
friend?
so creepy, dude.
Can you imagine, bro? And it's not even in the missed calls or the completed calls. I mean, that's
His wife saw him have the call,
crazy.
and it doesn't even show up on the phone.
That reminds me of that. Remember that when that subway or that train crashed and people kept getting phone calls and they thought
Phantom
those
calls,
people
yeah.
were alive inside and they were like, he keeps calling me, and they would tell the firemen and they were like, someone's got to. It was just a missed calls or whatever it was.
Yeah, in Japan,
calls.
they see people from that train crash all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Where?
I saw
just
that.
walking around,
Like, they see ghosts from a crash, a train wreck. It's in Japan. We've shown the video on doom scrolling. Check out doom scrolling. It's about to go parabolic. We're doing the weirdest shit. I don't know if YouTube will let us be seen. You know, YouTube is doom scrolling with Sam Tripoli. Let's see if it comes up. Nope, it's everybody but ours.
It's right there. There it is. There it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to get fire, dude. We were really cooking with gas, and then we got a little too. Yeah, that's the one we just dropped right there. Doom scrolling. What do you guys think of that thumbnail?
Too much going on.
You think it's too much?
Not enough tits for
And
me.
the words are too small. And doom scrolling is not legible.
I don't like you, Johnny.
It's just that it's a little busy.
It's a little busy, but that's okay. I mean, dude, we used to get 25,000 on there, and then we just started talking too much shit. And it's just,
What's that BS Live that got 45? That was a good one.
I think that one got some
Now go up.
numbers.
What was that one? What was that one about? They got 45.
Oh shit.
Oh, Sam
this
Attack
one?
on Stage. Yeah, we
that
got you
usually
Attack
works.
on Stage.
Yeah, it's
That
drama.
works.
People love drama.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, dude. Why can't I just be a good person?